Our topic for today is managing an aggressive disruptor on the board. Our speaker is Paddy Gray. Paddy is one of the UK's housing sector's most eminent figures. He's had a wide range of non-exec experience, including as first Irish president of the UK Chartered Institute of Housing. He's previously served as the vice president and treasurer there. He's held more board roles than we could count, and sits on an incredible number of boards currently as well, both in paid and unpaid housing and related boards. As a board member and as a chair, lots of chair experience. So today, Paddy's here to speak with us about his experience of managing an aggressive disruptor on the board. Paddy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for attending. This is my first time, or to be at this type of seminar, and I'm very privileged to be here. So thank you, Sarah, for that. We did speak before to the two of us at another online seminar a few weeks back, I think, or just before Christmas, which went down very well. I'm going to speak today mostly from my experience, but I did do a bit of Googling and a bit of sort of searching for some sort of templates and things around disruptive board members. And, some of the things I've come up with, I probably could have just done them off the top of my head anyway. But, obviously people try and make a science out of it, and they try and make sort of, and categorize things and put them into boxes and so forth. But, as Sarah rightly says, I'm probably on about 13 or 14 boards at the moment. People say, how do you do that? Well, I took early retirement from the university, first of all, so I don't have a full-time job. Secondly, a lot of them the meetings are, set well in advance, so they don't. And because I chair some of the boards, I'm able to sort of work that around that. And it's amazing what you can do, both with the online system and also with being there in person, which I prefer. Particularly when I chair a board or when I'm at a full board meeting, I prefer to have eye to eye and be able to sort of read the room, as it were, which you can't really do online, which I can't do at the moment here as well. But some of the very large boards, I saw someone from St Andrews there. I'm vice chair of Wheatley Homes Glasgow, and I was on the Wheatley Homes Group board, which operates right across Edinburgh, Glasgow, right down to Dumfries and Galloway, in 18 local authorities in Scotland. And I've also chaired a very small board in Belfast, which is only 1,000 properties, so 95,000 to 1,000. But the way I look at it is the chief executive, when you're flying a plane, it doesn't matter what size it is, you still need the same skills. In some cases, on the smaller plane, you don't have the same resources and the same sort of technology that a larger one would have. So in a way, it doesn't really matter around the size of an organization, but you do get a feel, and I've got a feel certainly from different boards, and I've certainly had disruptive board members. I mean, looking at some of the Google, and talk about destructive as opposed to disruptive. And destructive are basically people who are divisive, abusive. Others want to quit because of them. Disruptive is more where people want to, I suppose, hog the conversation. They interrupt others. And I've said again, I've Googled some of this here, but it's something I would say anyway. They need to always have the last word. And they're continually trying to prove themselves. And that, in a sense, is very, very difficult. Ego, self-interest, you get that a lot as well. And it's particularly sort of uncomfortable for newer board members, but also newer board members tend to do that as well because they want to prove themselves and they want to say, well, with their knowledge and so forth. So I think as a chair, and that's really the role that I'm taking today as a chair, that you have to be very, very aware of that. And, when you think of the types, again, the Corporate Governance Institute talked about the dominator in a meeting, and you'll know all this, Sarah, from your own, the slacker. The dominator is the one who wants to talk over others. The dominator is the one who only values their own views, and the dominator is that others will agree, basically so they'll stay quiet and agree because they're afraid to say anything and hope it'll go away. You know what I mean? I think that, again, you're the slacker, the person who attends meetings, and doesn't read minutes, doesn't just, is on the board for other reasons, probably their CV, probably to, enhance their CV and so forth. And then, of course, the absentee, the person that doesn't come, but when they do come, they can be disruptive because they haven't read the minutes from previous meetings and they try and bring back conversation that has happened at previous meetings and been, agreed. The devil's advocate who actually just wants to be disruptive, and that's their nature. And I stuck another one in, the people who which isn't on the corporate governance one, the factions, the people who try and organize factions within a board and have allies, as it were, and that's quite difficult, and it's very, very hard to deal with, because in many ways it's sort of I suppose it can grow, and can actually disrupt the other board members. But there's two areas that I would think about: intervention and prevention. And the first and foremost thing is that I would do as chair, and I've done it recently, done it on numerous occasions, is make sure that you confront it quickly when there's a problem. Make sure that you have a one-to-one with the person. Don't send emails, because you get into an email trail, it can be worse, and the keyboard warriors and so forth will come up with various things. Have an eye-to-eye conversation. I had an example recently where one particular board member was obviously, the behaviour was a newer board member, and the behaviour was really not acceptable. But at the same time, when I had the one-to-one, I said, look, your behaviour is not acceptable. What you're saying is actually quite good, but and they said, well, and those two people had complained, who had been on the board for quite a while, about the behaviour, and therefore wouldn't, anytime this person said anything, they would just throw their eyes up. And he complained back to me and said, well, look, these two people are unnerving me. And the people had complained. And so sometimes when you find out, actually, and then I was able to speak to all three of them and act as a conciliator, or so, in many ways a mediator, and try. And there has been a problem since that, because people have started to understand each other, and they become, in many ways, colleagues and friends as well. But you must confront it immediately. And always think of when you're sitting on the train, it says, say it, sort it. I say, say it, stop it. And make sure you stop anything so it doesn't fester. Prevention is another very, very good way of doing things. Obviously, when on the intervention is around behaviour, it's around it's making sure the individual knows it's not around her or him. It's around the organisation that you have to be thinking about all of the time. But prevention, build a culture of trust. So important. What I do at meetings is that every single meeting, I remind people of codes of conduct. In fact, I have the code of conduct sort of in some boards that have, I make sure it's on the wall while we're having the board meeting. And I also make sure that our mission and our values are on the wall as well, and remind people of the values, remind people of what we're around. Because if you again take a social organisation or a charity, and nowadays, because of the dynamics, because you have housing organisations managing 90,000 properties, 80,000, 70,000 building, and so forth, it's become a private business in many ways. Some of the bigger organisations. So you do need an eclectic group of people, with different skills. But the accountant may not get the social value. The accountant may not get the legal person may not get. Well, look, at the end of the day, we're maybe buying properties here that are probably overvalued, but we're getting subsidised. We're getting government subsidy over. Well, that doesn't work out in the private sector. And again, it's important to say, well, look, we're about social housing. This is just, coming from my end. We're about housing people. And if we don't house these people, the state will actually pay a lot more to put them up in hotels and bed and breakfasts and so forth. And it's getting that culture and reminding. So what I would do is, as I'm speaking, around one or two agenda items, I would get that in. Remember what our values are. Remember what we're about, why we're here. And then, that gets people then don't come out with being disruptive and being, because they do understand, and you can basically come back to that common denominator. And that's just talking from one end. Codes of conduct are very important. Ensure that imposing views are heard. Let everyone have their view, and make sure. And what I would do, it was with eye contact, without putting. I don't want to put people on sort of on a spot. I've done that many years with students. I never put a student on a spot, simply because some people are just, would find it very, very, they would have anxiety around being, put on the spot when they don't want to speak. But I would just, again, it's about reading the room and making sure that you allow people to speak, and you stop people when they're gone on too long, and you do it very diplomatic in a nice way. Another example that I'll give you is that we had an argument over a housing scheme that was being built, and we needed a decision very quickly. And one particular, who I would call disruptor, was going, oh no, we can't do this, had organised a faction of 3 people. Now this was it wasn't in Ireland, it was in GB. It organised a faction, but the other 2 weren't at the meeting. So therefore it kept going on and saying, well, we can't take this decision because there are people missing. And my view was that there will always be people missing. You cannot delay, because if you're going to do that, you'll be delaying a decision every single meeting because someone is missing. So we went on and just I said, look, I need a decision today. We're going to go. If you, and then I finished by saying, are we unanimous? And he agreed, yeah, we're unanimous. So, it's a matter of, being assertive, but at the same time is inclusive. And that's so important. And I think it's about reinforcing the importance of working as a team. And and one other, I through an appraisal process, I will find out on one-to-ones, and I intend to like to do all of the appraisals when I'm chair. Is that you find out what people need, where they're lacking, and what training they may need, because a lot of people who come on as NEDs don't really, especially younger people, they are, in many ways intimidated. They feel sort of, they're afraid to say something. What training do you need? Other people, if they're a disruptor, they don't mean to be a disruptor. It's just in their culture because they're afraid that they don't know enough, and they're afraid that actually that you don't consider them very, very useful. So they will come in and they will say lots of things about themselves, and they will make statements about their knowledge. But really, at the end of the day, it's very much, I suppose, trying to sort of be part of the board. But it's again around behaviour, and that's so important.